Welcome. We will start with the next chapter of NCERT Class 10 Geography, that is Manufacturing Industries in India. Now, as we know, manufacturing is an important sector which is a secondary sector activity. When we talked about the economic activities, we understood that this is a kind of secondary activity and the basic economic strength of a nation lies in the manufacturing. So, as of 2014, if we look around the GDP turnover, we would see that there is nearly 18% of the GDP that comes from agriculture, nearly 24% of the GDP comes from industry, and the remaining 52% of the GDP comes from service sector. So industries definitely form an important part of the total GDP of the nation. As a result, you had the National Manufacturing Cooperation Council that was established. Now if we look on to the basic idea why industries are important, we can say industries help to modernize agriculture. There are various agro-based industries which are based primarily on the agricultural produce, for example cotton industry. Then you have industry which leads to more export and trade. So industries are a way that could lead to more foreign earnings. Again, it helps to eradicate poverty and unemployment by giving more job opportunities, more salary and more income to the household. And finally, industries bring about diversification in the economy, which is very important, because if most of the people are engaged in agricultural activity and let's say the monsoon is not good, so there would be a huge number of mass that would be affected by the monsoon vagaries. So what would happen here would be, it's important to have a kind of diversification so that the economy does not suffer huge losses. Now, what are the factors that affect industrial location? There are various factors which are required before we plan out an industry to be established in a certain area. So, let's say if we are planning to establish an iron and steel industry, the first and the foremost thing would be there should be ample availability of water. This could be by means of a lake body, a river body that exists close to. Then you should have a market. Now this market is defined or governed by the amount of the finished product or the raw material it has. So you would have the determination of market, that is very important. The capital that goes into the industry. The labor, so another important thing would be cheap availability of labor. So let's say most of the industries are coming to be established in China or India globally. So it's because of the availability of cheap labor. Then availability of raw material. So let's say if you have a kind of sugarcane industry or sugar industry, I would say, that is to be established, you would establish it close to the sugarcane farms, because the transportation of the sugarcane itself would be a very bulky process. So availability of raw material and proximity to the raw material would be a key aspect if the raw material is bulky specifically. Then proper availability of power, land, good infrastructure and transport connectivity, and finally communication facilities. Now all these together helps us establish an industry. Now moreover, let's say I have an industry A that is established here. Some of the components of this industry A might be used in industry B. So I would have this industry B that would come and establish close to industry A, and similarly happens with industry C and industry D. And this, what finally happens is you have a kind of industrial cluster that is established in a particular area, and this is what is known as agglomeration effect. So that is a kind of agglomeration effect that works where you have more than one industry that tries to come out under a single location. Again, these industries are affected by the process of urbanization. So with the advent of urbanization, you have better transportation, better equipments, better communication facilities, banking, insurance, that all comes into action. So most of the industries are preferably located close to the urban areas where the availability of all these infrastructure and transport facilities becomes easier. Now, a simple outlay, I can say, how this industry system works is, you have an input that is transported to the factory. From factory you generate an output that is again transported to the market, and the money from this market goes back to the input. So that's a kind of chain or a kind of process that is involved in the industrialized system. So when you have an industrial establishment, you have this process that goes on. Now what is the various classification of industries? We have already covered this when we talked about class 7. So let's do a quick recap. We can classify industries based on the raw material. So it could be based on agricultural produce, so agro-based industries, mineral-based industries. Then you have based on the roles, whether it is an FMCG industry, a consumer goods industry, for example toothpaste, toothbrush, etc. It could be a main industry, that is iron, steel, coal, which is used as a main raw material for most of the industries or the building blocks of industries. Then you have based on investment, you could have a household industry or a cottage industry, a small scale industry or a large scale industry. Based on ownership, it could be privately owned like Tisco, it could be under public sector, it could be a kind of joint venture or cooperatives like Amul. Then you have based on the weight, there can be heavy industries like iron, steel, there could be light industries like you have the IT based industries and the software industries. Now we will be doing some of the important industries case by case. So the first industry that we would talk about today is the textile industry. Now let's start with how the textile industry really works. So I have the fiber with me that comes from the cotton plant. That fiber goes into spinning. After spinning, it goes into knitting. Finally you have the dye and the garment that is ready. So the output of this would be the garment. The fiber comes from the raw fiber that you have. By spinning, what you would generate is the yarn, that's the thread, and by knitting what you would generate is the fabric, that's the cloth, and finally the processed garment. So these are the 4 stages under which we try to understand the textile industry. So as we can say, it involves 14% of the industrial production, involves more than 35 million people, contributes to 24% foreign exchange earning and 4% of the GDP. So these are some of the general facts about textile industry. It was first established in Mumbai, and now you have nearly 1900 mills with 80% of them under private sectors. You have both hand looms and the power looms. Power looms are machine run, hand looms are hand driven. So khadi and charkha are examples of hand loom. In India, previously the main area was Maharashtra and Gujarat. However, the spinning slowly, so Maharashtra and Gujarat were centralized for fiber. Spinning slowly decentralized to Maharashtra, Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. Coimbatore as a main hub, which is known as southern India's Manchester. In Gujarat, Ahmedabad is known as the Manchester of India. In Maharashtra, Bombay is known as the Cottonopolis of India. Finally, you have weaving that occurs by khadi, charkha, and all these were decentralized and could be found throughout the nation. Now what India exports is mainly the yarn, and it exports it to Japan, US, UK, France, Singapore and Sri Lanka. And India is the second largest in terms of spindle production next to China. Now look at some of the interesting figures. If we export yarn, that is the product of spinning, we let's say earn rupees 80 per kg. However, if we export a trouser, it could be around rupees 800 per kg. So what is happening here is, from yarn to a garment, if you are moving, you are earning extensively in terms of export earnings. However, still India, due to lacks in its infrastructure and the erratic power supply and the issues of the textile industry, because of which it is still exporting yarn and it lags behind in export of garment. However, if India exports garment, it could earn much more foreign earning or foreign revenue as compared to exporting merely the yarn. So that is the basic idea or the basic concept that you need to be clear about when we talk about the textile industry. The next is jute industry. Now a backdrop of jute industry is important. With the partition of India and Bangladesh, what happened was most of the jute producing areas went to Bangladesh. So you have the production areas that went to Bangladesh. However, the mills remained in India. So that was the basic divide of the jute industry in India. Again, this industry is nowadays being replaced by synthetic fiber. Most of the mills are concentrated into the Hooghly region. India is the second largest exporter of jute after Bangladesh. However, this jute industry is now gaining importance back because it is coming up as a kind of fashion industry. In 2005, India laid down the national jute policy and is a good market. It has a good market in US, Canada, Russia, Arab and Australia. Moreover, the products that are made from jute are environmental friendly and biodegradable. So they are, it is a kind of industry which is on rise now. The next is the sugar industry, which also produces the gur and khansari. Now, so sugar industry was initially concentrated in the northern states of UP and Bihar. However, it gradually moved to southern India. The basic reason for this was, in southern India you have more of cooperative farming. It had more of cool climate which was must for the longer crushing seasons that was required. And finally, the southern sugarcane had higher sucrose content or higher sugar content as compared to the northern sugar canes. So there was a kind of shift into the sugarcane industry to south and southwest. The next is iron and steel industry. Now India, you have the major industry as the iron and steel industry. China is the largest producer and consumer. You have some of the facts which are given for the iron industry. Now let's understand how the iron industry works. First of all, you have the blast furnace. Under the blast furnace, you will have the iron that is melted. To melt that iron, you would flux in limestone. You would have the slag that would be removed and the coking coal that would be required. Then next to that, you would have, after the blast furnace, you would have production of pig irons. So it would be made in the molds, and those molds are known as pig. So you have the pig iron that is produced, that is the wrought iron, and from the wrought iron you would have the processed iron that is produced. So you would have finally the steel making and rolling and fabrication that takes place. So that's the process and the various steps of steel manufacturing in India. Now most of it is concentrated in the Chota Nagpur plateau region because of the high grade of iron content, cheap labor and low cost of production. Now again, it's important to note, as if I am trying to establish an industry, my primary concern would be reduction in the cost. So it would be by proximity to the raw material or by establishing in a region where you have cheap labor or cheap water supply that is available. India still has poor performance in case of iron and steel industry, that is attributed due to low productivity, irregular power supply, the high cost of the coking coal that comes here and the poor infrastructure facility in most of the regions. So you have Bhilai in Chhattisgarh, you have Jamshedpur and Bokaro in Jharkhand, you would have Durgapur, Burnpur in West Bengal and Raulkela and Jajpur in Odisha are some of the basic centers for iron and steel. Now there is another mnemonic that you must learn, DRB. That is, these are the three important plants and the order in which they were established. So Durgapur was established prior to Raulkela and Raulkela was established prior to Bhilai. Now the support from the various regions. So Bhilai was supported by Russia. So Soviet Union support or collaboration of Soviet Union led to establishment of Bhilai plant. The Raulkela plant was established with German collaboration. And finally, you have the Durgapur plant that was established with British collaboration. Of recent, there has been a Daitri plant that has come up in Odisha, and that is due to the collaboration of Britain and South Korea. So the collaboration of various nations for the various plants is again important. So Durgapur by British collaboration, Raulkela by German collaboration and Bhilai by Russian collaboration. Again, one more important thing under the iron steel industry is TISCO, Tata Iron Steel Company, is the only private sector company under steel manufacturing. The rest of the companies work under SAIL, that is the Steel Authority of India Limited. The next is the aluminum industry. Aluminum industry, we can say the ore that is used is bauxite, and this is very bulky and red in color. Around 4 to 6 tons of bauxite is used to produce 1 ton of aluminium. So you have cryolite that acts as an electrolyte in the process and speeds up the reaction. So you have aluminum industry, which is mainly used in wiring. It's a good conductor, it's malleable, and you have 8 plants that are found as Nalco and Balco in West Bengal, Kerala, Uttar Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. The next is chemical industries. India contributes 3% of the GDP for chemical industries, is third largest in Asia and 12th in the world. Now this chemical industry can be of 2 types, the inorganic chemicals and the organic chemicals. Organic chemicals include the petrochemicals, rubber, plastic, dyes, pharmaceuticals. However, inorganic includes synthetic fiber, soda ash, alkalis and detergents. The next few industries that we would be discussing, before that you have another important industry, that is fertilizer industry. Now fertilizer industry, we call it the NPK industry. This is very, very important to understand. Nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus. So nitrogen and phosphorus you have ample in India. However, the potash is imported in India. So India lacks the reserves for potash that is imported. And in terms of nitrogen fertilizers, India is the third largest in the world. There are nearly 10 PSUs and 1 cooperative, which is the Hazira in Gujarat, which works for fertilizer industry. Now what happened during the Green Revolution? So to promote the Green Revolution, there was lot of NPK fertilizer that was dumped into the market. As a result, you had good results from the Green Revolution. So there was ample cultivation and higher production that was witnessed. But over the years, it was realized that the quality of the land degraded significantly because of the use of the inorganic fertilizers that were NPK. Again, there is another interesting story on the fertilizer, that is urea, or that was a natural fertilizer that gained momentum. So what happened was, urea was provided as a fertilizer through the public distribution system. However, it was realized that this urea went into the open market to get more price for the urea and did not went through the public distribution system. So what did government do in order to curb this? Government launched a neem coated urea, and the urea that went into the open market was used in various industries. However, this neem coated urea could not be used in the industries, and this neem coated urea was supplied through public distribution system. So ultimately, since it was not used into the open market, it went to the farmers. And when it went to the farmers, it was realized that this neem coated urea has its own unique benefits. The most important was the slow dissolution. So slow dissolution of the urea led to the presence for a longer time into the soil, and again, since it was a kind of natural fertilizer that was used, it could overcome the problem of land degradation that was caused due to the NPK fertilizers. So you now have a kind of growing popularity of neem coated urea that is seen under a fertilizer industry. The next is the cement industry. So you have many large and small plants which manufacture cement industry. It's mainly used in construction. It started in 1904 in Chennai. However, in 1989 it was expanded because of the distribution and the decontrol of the price. Then the next is you have the automobile industry. It gained real momentum in the last 15 years with the foreign direct investment coming up. Delhi, Jamshedpur, Pune, Indore, Hyderabad are the main centers where you have the automobile industry. Finally, you have the software industry, the information and communication technology, which led to establishment of software parks and business process outsourcing units. Now, what are the drawbacks of having industries? Industries definitely lead to pollution. So, you have industrial pollution as one of the major drawbacks. Now, how come this pollution is caused? This is caused in terms of water because of the discharge that goes into the river. Then you have the noise pollution, the level of noise that is created by the industries, and it affects the proximity areas. The air pollution in terms of smoke, toxic gases, you have the Bhopal gas tragedy that took place. And finally, the thermal pollution, that's most important of all, that is due to the hot water that moves from the industries directly into the river, and this affects the flora and fauna of the wildlife of the river ecosystem. It can lead to problems of birth defects and cancers as well because of the effluents that are being discharged into the river. Now, how can we control pollution? The first is to understand the concept of reuse and recycle. So, for example, steel, plastics, all these could be reused and recycled. So, first way to control is reuse and recycle, then harvesting the rainwater properly because there has a lot of water that is required in the industrial processing. All the effluents that are directly being discharged into the river water must be treated so that all the harmful chemicals are removed. Recently, we have discovered a fungus eating bacteria, a fungi that could eat up plastics. So, you have to develop some kind of innovations in the field of science and technology which could help curb the problem of pollution. So, if you have fungus that could eat on plastic, the problem of plastic could decrease. Then what are the various types of treatment that could go? There are three basic types of treatment: the primary treatment, secondary treatment and tertiary treatment. The primary treatment is purely mechanical, so you have grinding and sedimentation and all the impurities would settle down in the water and you can use the top water. That's a kind of primary treatment. Under secondary treatment, you put in biological units. So let's say if you are putting this fungus, it would eat onto the plastic. You are putting other kinds of cyanobacteria into the water system. And finally is tertiary treatment, where you recycle the wastewater and all the waste from the water is removed. Again, most of the times you have groundwater that is being overused. So, there should be a check on overuse of the groundwater so that the grey zones do not develop and the water table does not go deep below. There are various other ways under which you can control pollution which are given by the NTPC, that is establishment of green belts, decreasing the pollution, monitoring, a kind of proactive approach to help understand that. And it is important to understand that 1 liter of the discharge that goes into the water pollutes nearly 8 times the quantity of fresh water that is present in the system. So, it is very important to check the amount of pollution that is going into the water bodies and the ecosystem. So, with this we cover the class or the chapter 6 of NCERT class 10. We will be covering the final chapter for NCERT class 10th in the next class. Have a good day ahead.